My name is Kelly, and I turned 35 this year. On a sweltering summer day, I was unexpectedly called into the president's office. The rhythmic sound of cicadas filled the background, their constant buzzing a reminder of the heat. I entered the office, my heart thudding. President, what is it? I asked, trying to sound confident. My mother, who also happened to be the company president, sat fanning herself. She barely glanced at me before dropping a bombshell. I've decided to hand over the company to your sister. So, you're fired, effective today. She didn't even look up from her papers as she said it. For a second, everything froze. The sunlight streaming through the window was blinding, as if to mock my sudden loss of direction. What? I managed to croak, my voice sounding more foolish than I intended. My mother sighed in annoyance, flicking her eyes toward me as if I were an insect she needed to shoo away. Didn't you hear me? You're fired. We don't need you here anymore. Move out by the end of this month. With that, she snapped her fan shut, her attention already returning to the documents on her desk. I stood there, dumbfounded, as her dismissal sank in. The cicadas droned on, an indifferent chorus to my unraveling world. Are you still here? Get back to work. My mother's voice cut through my shock and I nodded, stepping out into the hallway. I mumbled, "If you'll excuse me," and closed the door behind me. I walked through the office, still in a daze. Our company was small, just a 2-story building with about 10 employees. Everyone worked in demolition, and it was a family-run business. My mother was the president, and the vice presidents were my aunt and her husband. The managing directors, my mother's cousin and her spouse. Almost all the authority lay in my mother's hands. After high school, I had taken a job at an accounting firm, but when I turned 25, my mother summoned me home. "We have no accountant, Kelly," she said. "Are you going to abandon your family in their time of need? You'll be the last to suffer." With guilt hanging over me, I agreed, and that's how I became part of the family business. But I wasn't just the accountant. I was the catch-all worker. I did everything from clerical duties to miscellaneous errands. When we were short-handed, my mother even sent me on sales calls. I worked tirelessly, from dawn until well into the night, never complaining, always trying to prove myself. I wanted to earn my place, to earn my mother's approval. Meanwhile, my younger sister Samantha, who had been named as my replacement, was only 32 and had joined the company just 2 years ago. Unlike me, Samantha was restless, constantly quitting jobs, always claiming they didn't suit her. As she hit her 30s, finding employment became harder, and she often whined at home about how low the pay was in the few jobs she did manage to get. My mother, ever her savior, decided that Samantha deserved a role at our company. "There's a suitable job for you, Samantha," she had said, welcoming her as a managing director. Even though I'd been with the company for over a decade, I remained a regular employee. The difference in treatment between Samantha and me was apparent to everyone, but I told myself that it was just the way things were. My mother had always favored Samantha. She had always bought Samantha pretty clothes and lovely toys, praising her beauty. Meanwhile, I got hand-me-downs, with my mother remarking, "This is good enough for you." As a child, I never understood why she treated me that way. All I wanted was her approval, so I tried my best, studying hard, helping out whenever I could. But nothing I did seemed to matter. It was my aunt who finally told me why. "Your father didn't pass away, Kelly. He ran off with another woman when Samantha was born. The woman he left with wasn't as attractive as my mother and was actually older, but apparently she reminded everyone of me." My aunt said, "Your mother has a lot of pride. She couldn't stand that your father left her for someone she deemed less attractive. I think that's why she treats you the way she does." So I was the reminder of my father's betrayal, the ugly reminder that my mother could never forgive. And now here I was, being discarded in favor of Samantha, just like old toys that had outlived their use. Despite all of this, I kept doing my job as best as I could. But the company was struggling. The rising costs of industrial waste disposal and transportation were biting into our profits. It was becoming hard to even make payroll, and I often wondered how we were going to afford Samantha's salary. One day, my mother approached me with a solution. "I'll cut your salary so we can pay Samantha. Since we're family, it's only natural." I had argued that even if she reduced my salary, it wouldn't be enough to cover Samantha's pay. My mother didn't care. "It's your job as a veteran to make things work," she snapped. "Just do it." I had suggested tentatively that Samantha should perhaps start as a regular employee, but my mother glared at me, silencing me with, "Who do you think you are to say that?" Despite everything, I kept going. I paid $1,500 a month to live in the same house as my mother and Samantha. While Samantha paid nothing, I covered my share and more. I did the cooking, the cleaning, and all the household chores, while Samantha simply waited for things to be done. "Sis, isn't dinner ready yet?" Samantha would call even when I was working late at the office. "I'm at work, Samantha. Can't you make something yourself?" I'd reply. "What should I make?" She'd whine. "The kitchen's your domain. I don't want to get scolded for doing something wrong." And so, reluctantly, I'd come home, cook, and then head back to the office. My mother rarely cooked for us, and Samantha never lifted a finger to help. This year, my mother turned 63, and her complaints increased. Aches, pains, the effects of her heavy drinking. And then one day, I was called to the president's office and told I was fired. "I'm handing the company over to Samantha. You're just an ugly duckling, Kelly," my mother said, her voice cold. It made sense in a twisted way that she'd hand the company over to Samantha. Samantha was the same age now that my mother had been when she took over the company. Perhaps my mother thought Samantha could use her beauty to attract clients, just as she had. But being fired because of my appearance, that was something I couldn't accept. I discussed it with my aunt, and she confessed that Samantha didn't like how people always said, "Don't worry, we'll ask Kelly." Samantha hated that I was the one everyone trusted, and that hatred had pushed my mother to make this decision. Samantha had been sloppy in her work, missing deadlines, making mistakes, not taking responsibilities seriously. But my mother's favoritism overrode logic. "I can't believe she's firing you," my aunt said with a sigh. "But you're better off without them, Kelly. You're too capable not to start over somewhere else." And with that, I decided to let go. The sense of liberation was overwhelming. I spent my last days at the company preparing handover documents, organizing everything, making sure that anyone could understand what needed to be done. Finally, the last day arrived. I went to my mother's office to say goodbye, but neither she nor Samantha even acknowledged me. They laughed about a salesman having a crush on Samantha, oblivious to my presence. I coughed to get their attention. Samantha looked at me, puzzled. "What's up?" "We don't need dinner today," she said. "Today is my last day here," I said. "Thank you for everything." Samantha blinked, then burst into laughter. "Oh, was that today?" I totally forgot. My mother gave a perfunctory, "Yes, thank you for your hard work," without even looking up. Realizing I would never have to see their faces again filled me with a strange, exhilarating freedom. A week later, after I left the company, I received 14 missed calls from my mother in just 2 hours. Something told me to ignore them. The calls kept coming, increasing until I had 80 missed calls by the next morning. I knew she would try to manipulate me into coming back, and I refused to let that happen. For the first time, I chose myself. I left the calls unanswered, my phone set to silent, and went on with my life. Eventually, the calls slowed, then stopped altogether. Over the next year, I rebuilt my life. I took on temp jobs, attended a correspondence course for tax accountants, and passed my exams. My experience at my mother's company made me valuable to a major accounting firm. And for the first time, I found myself working in an environment where people were kind, where colleagues helped each other. The contrast was stark, and it made me realize just how toxic my old life had been. One day, while visiting a client near my mother's company, I noticed the building looked different. The windows were dirty, the plants I used to take care of were withered. As I was leaving, I ran into my mother. She saw me, and her face lit up. "Kelly, where have you been?" I hesitated, instinctively fearing her scolding, but instead, she spoke in an affectionate tone. Do you know how many times I called you? Look at the state of the company. Isn't it terrible? Come back, starting tomorrow. I'm not mad. What? I was baffled. She seemed to think that I would simply run back to her. Mom, I'm already working at another company and I'm happy there. Her face darkened. Who cares about other companies? You belong to me, she yelled in the middle of the street. I took a deep breath and said, You were the one who fired me, remember? What about Samantha? She snorted. Samantha was useless. She got caught dating 3 clients at the same time and everything fell apart. I put her in the office, but she couldn't even handle basic tasks. The office is a mess. It's your responsibility to fix it. Kelly. No, Mom. You fired me because I was unattractive, remember? My voice was steady as I spoke, the crowd around us watching. Responsibility or not, you fired me. And now you want me back just because things didn't go as planned? My mother's face paled, and she began to sweat under the judgmental stares of those around us. She tried to quiet me, but I raised my voice. You said ugly people should just obey the beautiful ones. You fired me for Samantha, and now that she's failed, you want me to clean up her mess? No, Mom, I'm done. The crowd murmured, and some even began filming. My mother's face twisted in anger, and she shouted, Ugly people should just quietly obey. Her harsh words echoed in the air, captured by the cameras around us. The video quickly spread, reaching her business contacts. One by one, the clients cut ties with her. The company went bankrupt, and my mother and Samantha lost everything. They visited my apartment once, but I didn't open the door. Eventually, they moved into a rundown old apartment, living in fear of creditors. Samantha tried to use her looks to charm male coworkers, but it didn't work. She was disliked, and she had to change jobs often. As for me, I found a new beginning. I even found love. Someone who respected me, valued my hard work, and loved me for who I was. He wasn't handsome, but he was sincere, and we planned to marry soon. For the first time in my life, I was happy, truly happy, and grateful that I had always taken my responsibilities seriously. My past, filled with hardships, had prepared me for this future. And now, it was my time to live, free from the shadows of those who had tried to keep me down.